That serial killer? None other than the Chesapeake Ripper. This would explain why the Ripper has been silent for more than 2 years.
The Chesapeake Ripper strikes again. Or does he? A nurse is brutally murdered at the Baltimore State Hospital for the criminally insane in a way that is reminiscent to that of how the Ripper used to display his victims. Will just has to figure out if Abel Gideon, the man responsible for the nurse's murder, is exactly who he says he is, or if he's just plagiarising the Ripper and taking credit for all of his past work. So much went on in this week's episode. If being introduced to the famous Baltimore Hospital alone wasn't enough, we saw Jack being haunted by his past, a first glimpse of Hannibal striking from the shadows, a close-up of the Ripper's killings, and to top it all off, we were introduced to my favourite side character in the show, of one Dr. Frederick Chilton. And that's exactly where I'm gonna start. Hannibal's first season is of course taking place before all of the feature-length films. Here and there, tie-ins and characters have been made and created to establish a link to the previous material, so it was only fitting that eventually we arrived at the door of the Baltimore State Hospital for the criminally insane. We all know who ends up behind these particular bars at some point down the line, but to visit this famous building in the show where so many memorable events have taken place before just adds that whole new level of excitement to an already fascinating show. I got so many Silence of the Lamb vibes throughout the whole time that we spent in there, and none more so came from its own administrator. Raul Esparza is just utterly brilliant as the arrogant, proud head of the Baltimore Hospital. You'll know already if you've seen any of my previous reviews just how highly I regard this particular casting. And it is justly deserved because in one episode we see that Chilton, much like Hannibal, is keen to explore the more unorthodox methods. The story's episode was all about the Chesapeake Ripper and if Abel Gideon, played by special guest star Eddie Izzard, was indeed the man whom he was claiming to be. The Ripper has not killed anyone in around 2 years, which is roughly the same time when Gideon was administered. Time-wise, it does fit that he is the Ripper, and yes, his kills do look like the Ripper's. But like everyone said, apart from Chilton that is, it just doesn't feel like the Ripper. Will knows that Gideon is just plagiarising the Ripper's kills. But how on earth would Gideon even know how the Ripper displayed his victims in the first place? The reports were never revealed to the public. How? Well, that was Frederick's mess. Whether inadvertently or not, Chilton planted the idea in Gideon's mind that he was the Chesapeake Ripper. His coercive persuasion pushed him into believing and living that scenario, something which Hannibal was able to get out of him when they all sat down at dinner. Hannibal admitted himself he is much more forgiving of the unorthodox than Dr. Bloom, whom by now, after hearing what Chilton said, will suspect that he planted the idea on purpose. Chilton is a man who wants his name to rise in the ranks of the psychiatric world, and holding the title to having the Chesapeake Ripper locked up behind his own bars would have been a tempting idea into achieving just that. We also had our first flashbacks this week as we jumped back 2 years in time to when the Ripper was still in the spotlight. Jack was determined to catch him as he enlisted a very Clarice-esque recruit in trainee Miriam Lass. She looked at Jack as her mentor, and despite his aggressive way of teaching, he grew attached to Miriam and looked at her like his protege. It's not all too different in the way that Jack currently cares about Will, but in them succeeding in a bad idea to enrage the real Ripper, Jack brought upon him some haunting past events. Miriam disappeared and was the final victim of the Chesapeake Ripper. No body was ever found, and it wasn't displayed like all of the others were. Jack began to receive numerous phone calls from his home in the middle of the night, at the office, and when he was at the office he was called from his own phone, with Miriam Lass apparently on the end of it. The Ripper was taunting Jack, trying to give him false hope that his former trainee might just still be alive. Jack bought into it, he just couldn't help it, and he was airing his feelings to the one person who was responsible for all of the horror that he was reliving. I called Hannibal the Devil last week, and here we saw him for the very first time emerge from the shadows to strike a devastating attack that's actions would still ripple and affect those around him all these years later. My overall verdict for this week's episode of Hannibal is a 9 out of 10. Hannibal this week really started to delve deep into some of its source material. With the Baltimore Hospital and Dr. Frederick Chilton being the two standouts, the show proved that in revisiting these familiar settings can work wonders in the TV format. Watching Jack, Alana or Chilton walk throughout the hospital's halls just gave out a feel-good vibe and that it belonged in the show's story. Oh, and you know I said last week that the Angel Maker could be the killer to give us the most brutal crime scenes? Well, scratch that, because he's got nothing on the Chesapeake Ripper. Even though we know he isn't the real Ripper, Gideon still displayed his barbaric and torturous methods. Eddie Izzard played his role extremely well as our resident inmate, and in terms of his future, expect more appearances later on this season. Gideon though showed no remorse for what he had done, but there were just too many aspects off in too many of his different murders, which had Will knowing instantly that he was not the man who he was claiming to be. You could see in Will's eyes how much it hurt him to stand in Gideon's shoes and witness a murder similar to that of what the Chesapeake Ripper did. It unhinged him as soon as he came out of his trance, and he's already told Jack he doesn't know how long he'll be able to cope with all of this, but if by any chance the Ripper starts to kill again, I do not think his mind will last much longer. There were a couple of moments that stood out to me this week, one being the look on Hannibal's face when he read Freddie Lowndes' article saying that Gideon was the real Ripper. Boy was he pissed in there. And the other was the ending as Jack aired his feelings to Hannibal in front of the fire. Hannibal exuded the same brooding evil that has been ever present as he calmly sat in his chair and listened to all of the pain that he had caused around him. Mads once again puts on a phenomenal performance, but the darkness that hides beneath the surface is what he excels at more than anything else. Just look at him when he's choking the life out of Miriam Lass. Scary stuff. And thinking back, it's here at this very moment when I first began to think that Mads could become my pick for the ultimate Hannibal Lecter. So what did you guys think about this week's episode of Hannibal? And come on, admit it, the Chilton casting is spot on. Did you guys get some Silence of the Lamb vibes from the episode? And did you enjoy Eddie Izzard's character? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the review. And I'll see you on the next one.
Don't give me ideas. Your tongue is very feisty. And as this evening has already proven, it's nice to have an old friend for dinner.